I hadn't heard of the term peer worker before I was invited, and it does sound like it's at the cutting edge of what needs to happen in the working world. I think we all know in a personal experience that that's what we're connecting with our lived experience of whoever we're talking to. But I think in the working world it's always been put aside. So I feel privileged to be part of your world and to be able to speak to you. So thank you for inviting me. Okay, so responding to triggers of trauma, self-care strategies. So a little bit of what I'm going to talk about will include my personal living experience, but mainly it's going to be drawing on the resources and the science behind it all, which is, at the moment, that's the cutting edge, is on trauma. And so I'll start with this. No, I won't. There we are. Being me depends on. Now, this is a little gadget that I got from Terry O'Connell, who was a sergeant in the police force and one of the leaders of restorative justice. And one of the, I lived in France for a while in my youth, and one of the key phrases that is part of the French culture is d'être bien dans sa peau, to be well in your skin. And that's used, people will say, you know, I'm not feeling good in my skin, or are you feeling good in your skin? It's a cultural phrase. But that now is evidence-based research, that feeling good in your skin is part of what it is to be feeling healthy. In your skin, in your body. And this little ball gives a metaphor for that. So what we can see here is a closed ball. And with this we can imagine the sense of being threatened, that we are ready to attack another, or we're just defending ourselves, like porcupines and echidna. That sense of being closed, ready to attack and defend ourselves. But as people, and as all of nature, we are also able to be open. And with an openness, we are very happy to invite others into our skin, our place, our sense of being. And this is what it is to be. Either we feel closed and threatened, or we're able to be open. So really, being me depends on a whole lot of factors. Since COVID-19, there has been an increase in post-traumatic stress disorder, as well as trauma experienced in the general public. No longer is trauma seen as out of the ordinary. Everybody in the whole world was impacted from social safety. David Trelevian, the key researcher in mindfulness and trauma, states that 90% of the United States population have stress and traumatic stress, whilst less than 5% have post-traumatic stress disorder as a diagnosis. So everybody has been affected. We all, what used to be minority is now majority. So I want to tell you about a story about what happened to me not too long ago when I was with my grandchildren. And I am now, at this time in my life, a full-time buba. So what that means is that I am there for my grandchildren so my daughter can work full-time. Well, she works part-time actually, but without me being able to be there, she can't work because her income isn't so. She's a preschool teacher. She doesn't earn enough money to send her children to preschool. So I love this opportunity to be with my grandchildren and to pass on to them what I have learnt in my life, which I think is useful for them to have and to hold. So this little story is about, we're sitting at the table and there's a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, the 4-year-old has, like we were having before, coloured pencils and things like that. And I am helping her to learn to write letters. So she's in the very early stages of just learning a circle and a line to be able to draw letters. So I have her attention and I'm sitting in between, and my 2-year-old is sitting next to me, and she is, she just has paper and I've drawn some triangles, some shapes, and she just has pencils and doing whatever she wants to do. So I'm sitting between them, but my attention is on the 4-year-old. So, you know, we're actively engaged in our stuff, and then all of a sudden the 2-year-old next to me falls off the chair. She's following a pencil that's fallen, and she falls off with it and she starts screaming. So I move my attention away from the 4-year-old onto the 2-year-old to gather her up from the floor. Now the 4-year-old is annoyed that I have shifted my attention away from her onto the 2-year-old. So the 2-year-old is still screaming, so I'm picking her up to check if she's broken anything, if something's been damaged, or is it just shock? But I don't know, because her screaming is not enabling me to find out. So I'm still holding her, and the 4-year-old is still getting, you know, quite agitated that I'm not attending to her. Anybody here know what I'm talking about? So that's going on, and that happens in the workplace with adults. It's not just happening in my home with my grandchildren. So I now start to be triggered. What triggers me off is that my 4-year-old doesn't care what's happening around her. And the reason why my attention is moved, because of the 2-year-old being in pain. And that triggers me to that sense of, how can you not care? So now I feel like I'm going to be triggered, and if I continue and the 3 of us stay in this space, there's going to be 3 very angry, upset people. And that's no space to be in. So I quickly recognise this is what's happening, and I move the 2-year-old, I'm holding her, she's screaming, I move her onto a rocking chair. And this is, I see, as a very important resource for any mother, and I've kept it all my life. It's a very useful resource. So I'm sitting on the rocking chair with the 2-year-old, and as I'm rocking, I'm beginning to soothe her. And the 4-year-old, of course, has followed. Now things have changed, because I've started to feel my sense of comfort moving with the rocking chair. The 2-year-old is being able to be soothed also by that comfort, and the 4-year-old is quietening down, watching what's going on. So that sense of vicarious resilience is taking place. At this point, I'm able to speak to my 2-year-old and get her to respond. Did something hurt? Are you in pain anywhere, or are you just in shock? And now she's able to respond, shock. So now we know that all we need to do is just be calm. And now I am calm, she's not screaming anymore, and I can turn to the 4-year-old and say to her, what do you see just happened? What's happening now? And she's able to say, because of course I've told her about the ball, I'm closed and I want to be open. That's what she says. And then I say to her, have you ever fallen down? What do you want when you've fallen down? And you can see her mind, I can see her mind ticking over, and without anything else said, she goes over to the 2-year-old and gives her an authentic kiss and says with her heart, I'm sorry. So in that moment now, the 3 of us are okay. So now there's no crying, there's no anger, there's no upset, and we're all able to go back to the table and continue our work. And that really is what we want to do in life, because we get triggered all the time. Some of us more than others. And really what we're doing is trying to keep our balance. And balance is what it's all about. In nature, the way that our world is created, it is all about keeping in balance. And it's not that the world has been created, and us as well, in balance and balance being constantly there. It's not. It's all about moving towards balance, recovering, getting into balance. Just as anybody who has ever canoed, people here, anybody ever tried to be on a canoe or any of those watercrafts? That's right, without an engine, you are how you sit, how you move, these are the things that matter. And that's really what it's all about. How do we get back to that balance? So mindfulness self-care, in the story I just told you, included these points: breathing, movement, time, tracking, empathy, mentalising, compassion, and sponging, mirror neurons, which I'm going to come back to this slide later and talk about it in more detail. But I just wanted to share with you what some of the strategies are that and all these strategies take practice. It's not oh yes, okay, I'll breathe now. No, this is a practice. All of these things are a practice. And that is what, when you think of the history of humanity, that's what pre-industrialisation was all about, practicing how to be in balance. That's exactly what everybody did. But through industrialisation and through the work, everybody putting their attention on working, especially to be productive and efficient and effective, all those things have somehow got lost, and you do that in your personal time. So as human beings, self-care is critical. Okay, so what is self-care? It is changing your thoughts and behaviours so they better contribute to your well-being. That is self-care. It isn't indulging yourself. It's not about going to the hairdresser. It's not about going for a cruise once a year. And it's not about gambling or going off to the pub. That's not self-care. It is resourcing yourself so you can take care of yourself and others. It is not selfish. It is an ongoing practice. It is not one and done. And it is changing the intention of your everyday activities. And it is not time-consuming. It is often free, and it is not expensive. Now, the scenario I told you about, the conflict with my grandchildren, that could have spiralled into a very unpleasant afternoon if I wouldn't have been able to notice where I was going, my sense of being triggered. There's no way I would have been able to support my grandchildren. My 2-year-old would have been screaming, the 4-year-old, I would have got angry with her. That would have spiralled her off into feeling closed even more than what she was. It would have been a disastrous afternoon. But because self-care, I'm a natural health therapist as well as conflict resolution analyst, because self-care has been a constant, practice in my life, then I'm just so aware of when an opportunity comes up to really put all that into practice. So Wikipedia only works in practice. In theory, it's a total disaster. So this is a great quote from Sue Gardner, who was the foundation director of Wikipedia. So in theory, it doesn't work, but in practice, we all use it. It's fantastic. And that's the same about self-care. It is not a theory that's going to make any difference. It's the constant practice. Okay, so part of my work, as I mentioned, is as a natural health therapist. And this includes doing things like nature forest therapy, which is Shinrin-yoku, and to really understand the value of mindfulness, I have found it useful to understand the power of qi, or energy. Here there are 2 Chinese characters that are descriptions of qi. The first, this one here, is a pot of rice, and this is a symbol of energy transformation of the movement, like the chemistry of transformation. So what we see here is in Qi, this description is a very practical understanding. Just as you put a pot of rice, yes, on heat and it boils, we watch how it transforms into something we can eat. So we can understand that Qi includes this sense of transforming. This over here, however, is an older character used to describe Qi. This is more modern, but in the traditional Chinese, this was more often used. And here, the symbol here is fire, and this one is nothing. And what that symbolises is that fire, where does fire come from? It comes from nothing. And so there's this sense of mystery, of something that we can't explain, that is Qi. So together we can see there's a practical element and there's a mystical element. Okay. So let us experience this Qi, how the outer world can influence our inner world in mind and body. And this exercise that I'm just going to share with you comes from Dan Siegel. I don't know if any of you know Dan Siegel, who created the field of interpersonal neurobiology. Okay, so if I ask you all, now I'm going to ask you to close your eyes, but if that triggers anybody, please don't close your eyes. And if you notice when you're closing your eyes, you don't feel safe, you don't feel comfortable, then open them. I'm just inviting you to close your eyes because it might be more useful to experience this exercise. And at the end of the exercise, I'm going to ring this bell. So that will also be an opportunity for you to open your eyes. Okay, so when I call out a word, I just want you to experience that word. Just notice what's going on inside of you, in your body, in your hands, in your feet, in your stomach, in your head, what thoughts may come up for you. Just notice, and it won't be long, but I'm going to call this word out a number of times, and all I'm asking you to do is notice what is happening. Okay, we ready? No. 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 Okay, did you all notice what happened inside of you? Okay, so here's another one. Shake yourself a bit. And again, close your eyes if you can. Don't if you don't want to. I'm going to call another word and ask you to do the same thing. Just notice, and particularly go back to those places that you noticed something before. Yes. 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 So what happened there? What did you notice? Pardon? What did you notice? Anybody notice something different with the 1 and the 2? What did you notice? Yes?
The one I stiffened up, and the other one I stayed the same.
Anybody have a different experience? Yeah?
Something was coming down on me. With the other, I felt like I was going out.
Yeah. Did it make you sort of remember this one? Yeah? Yes.
I think for me it was a different, like both of them had power, but it was a different kind of power. And so, like the no was that more kind of stubborn, you know, I am not doing this, I am not accepting this, whatever. Whereas yes, it's like, this is what I can do.
That's right. And that is what it comes down to, is that the energy, all energy has power. And in the first exercise with the no, there's that sense of not going to accept it, that sense of repulsion, trying to push it away. But with the yes, there's a sense of receptivity. This is something I am happy to receive. Did somebody find it different? Yes.
It actually scared me when you yelled no. Scared the hell out of me. And then when you said yes, it was like more calming that.
That's right. And haven't we all experienced that in our day-to-day life? No, even getting on a bus. The bus driver says, no, you can't get on, you haven't got the Opal card, or just any experience you have. That no is an energy, and that yes also has an energy. Okay, so this is another exercise that might be quite useful. And this is, take your two fingers, the two fingers that are between, what are they called? The pointer finger and the middle finger, yes, of one hand, and put it on between your eyebrows. And hold your thumb on one nostril and a ring finger open. Ring finger, that's right. Okay, so breathe through the open nostril. Close it with the ring finger. Open up the thumb and breathe out. Breathe in through the thumb finger. Close it. Open with the ring finger and breathe out. Again, breathing in. Close it and breathing out. If there's a box of tissues around, you might want to pass it around. Again, one more time, breathing in. Close it and breathing out. And now change hands. Again, the two fingers, the pointer and the third finger on between your eyebrows, your thumb on one nostril, and breathing in. Close it with the ring finger, open the thumb, breathing out. Breathing in through the thumb finger. Closing it, breathing out. And one more. Breathing in through the thumb finger, through the ring finger. Closing it and breathing out. Now that exercise actually helps clear your head. In our head we have different hemispheres, and this is a chi exercise that helps to clear your mind, to think fully, because we have a tendency to be more concentrated in one side than the other. So this is again creating a balance in our head. Okay. So George Slovich, a doctor who's the director of the Cousins Centre for Psychoneuroimmunology and Department of Psychiatry and Biobehavioral Sciences in the University of California. Now there's all sorts of university departments that are set up looking at the body or science, including the interpersonal as well as just the biological. And this is very new. This is something that hasn't quite trickled down into the visits to the doctor or even going to the hospital. It hasn't trickled down yet. But this is like George Slovich put this theory together 2 years ago. So it's very present. It's very vogue at the moment. So what he's identified is that the body has two parts of our immune system. We have an innate immune system that's come down through our heritage, our biological, our parents that we are born with. And then we have an adaptive immune system that comes from our lived experiences. And they impact on each other. It's not like they are different, they work together. And that's why somebody can have perhaps a disease very later on in their life, but they didn't have it up until then because whatever their body was able to deal with it up until then, but something happened, an environmental, an interpersonal, something's happened to trigger off that disease in them. So knowing that there is this biological, this innate as well as adaptive part of our immune system, now the interesting thing is, well, what does create that adaptive? What impacts on the adaptive? And what we can see here is that interpersonal interactions actually impact on what's going on in our body. They affect our nervous system, they affect our immune system, they affect our hormonal system, they affect every part of our body. So much so that, I don't know if any of you have heard of this book called Compassionomics. This was actually written just before COVID. So they're talking about, at that time, compassion was really the in thing in science. Yes? And in fact, there's a book that I'm selling out there which is called Conversations on Compassion, because it was so in, but I felt that it wasn't really inclusive of cultural factors that compassion science was sort of leaving out. And I just want to read you a little bit of this and then go back to what George Slovich has put together. Okay, this is about a patient in a hospital, and his body has just got worse and worse and worse in terms of being able to function, and he's got to the point now where he needs a ventilator. He can't breathe by himself. He's just very, very, his body is completely broken. So here we are. And this is what he's saying. After weeks of being on a ventilator in the ICU ward, I could tell right away when a new nurse came on duty at the change of shift and entered my room. I could tell within 1 minute whether or not the nurse cared. If it was a nurse who did not care, my heart would sink. My spirit was crushed. I lost my will, and I did not believe I would ever get off the ventilator. But if it was a nurse who cared, one of my angels, I would instantly feel stronger. I believed I could beat this and breathe on my own again. Without my angels, I never would have made it. Their compassion is what saved me. Now, this experience, I am sure, is something that anybody who's been in a very traumatic situation would be able to identify with, the difference between how people relate to them. But the interesting thing about this story is the person who's telling it. It was Dr. Edward D. Viner, who was chair of the Department of Medicine at Cooper University Healthcare for more than 20 years, and now is the founding director of the Centre for Humanism at Cooper Medical School of Rowan University. And he is the person, when he got better, created this book. What he created in his university was he got his 2 top researchers to do a systematic study of compassion in the health system, a complete study which took them 2 years to see if compassion makes a difference. He wanted the science to say what he felt, what he knew in his lived experience. And they were able to do it, and then they created this book. So all the work that you're doing, every moment of compassion that you're giving a human being is really making a massive difference. The other thing about what goes on in our lived experience is memory. So just like our adaptive immune system carries memory of whether the virus, if we have been vaccinated, then there's a sense of a memory that we can now fight off the virus. That sense of memory also is around our lived experiences of interpersonal. And it's not just what people are saying to us, but it includes what we experience to others and what people are seeing in front of us, what we witness. All of those things affect our immune system, our body, our sense of whether or not we're feeling good in our skin. So although Slavic did include like the social aspect, of course he did, and down here there's a sense of air pollution, diet, all these things are also part of our adaptive immune system and how it's going to operate. There is one thing that he didn't quite put in, which I'm going to share with you, and that is the effect of forest bathing. Now this is sort of the latest thing that's going on in the world, and so forest bathing started in Japan, called Shinrin-yoku, and it means, Shinrin-yoku means forest bathing. And it was, I'll just read out what it says here. These findings indicate that forest bathing trips increase NK, which means natural killer activity, which was mediated by increases in the number of natural killer cells and the levels of intracellular anti-cancer proteins. Photosides released from trees and the decreased production of stress hormones may partially contribute to the increased natural killer activity. So this, and what it's saying here is very much that it is trips. So we're not talking about jogging through Centennial Park or jogging through Hyde Park. We're not just talking about sitting under a tree and going through our text messages. A trip is a whole experience, a Shinrin-yoku trip, a nature forest therapy trip. And there's lots of research on this. In fact, the research on the bigger scale is called forest medicine. Okay, so what does social safety theory mean? That's George Slavic's theory that includes that sense of interpersonal experience. And it means that humans are designed and evolved to foster social safety. We are created to feel safe and to notice when we don't feel safe. We have been created as much as the porcupines, the echidnas, the lizards, every part of nature has got this, what Deb Dana calls a surveillance system. You look like you know what I'm talking about. Do you? Oh, okay. Okay, so...
I'm just catching up on a bit that I missed to make sure I wasn't missing it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, so social safety is good for our health and behaviour. Just like this sense of being open, it enables not just us to be smiling and happy with other people, there's all sorts of activity within our body, our cells, that is going to happen, and there's going to be very different when we're closed and when we're open. Very different. Social threat is harmful for our health and behaviour. So he's called it the social safety theory, because that is the theory. Whether or not we feel safe, it's a subjective experience, is going to impact on our well-being, if we feel good in our skin. Okay, so I think everybody here is familiar with the concept of triggers, yes? The sense of something has just triggered. So what's happened? Just like in that experience of when I said no, that sense of closing up, fear, feeling oppressed, you know, that sense of I'm going to fight back to this, or what's going on here, that closing up sense can lead, if it's long enough, if that trigger is sustained, it will lead us to a tremor where we will actually feel it in our body if it's sustained. And glimmers are the opposite. So glimmers are when you're looking out at the window and you're seeing the flickering of the leaves, or you're seeing a child playing, walking on the leaves. You're seeing something that makes you feel good. That's a glimmer. If that glimmer is sustained long enough, it will turn into a glow. And just as that tremor is affecting your body, so that glow also impacts on your health and on your body. Now, moving from triggers to glimmers is not easy or even possible sometimes. However, just as triggers have become routine and easily leading to tremors because of well-worn pathways inside and outside of us, so we can create and sustain pathways for glimmers leading to glow. And really, I would think that that's part of your work, is as much as possible in the workplace. If you're doing peer work, you are supporting glimmers. You're supporting the non-sustainable continuation of a trigger to trauma, and rather supporting that transformation from a glimmer to glow. So one of the latest, maps that's now being used for tremor, dealing with trauma rather, is this concept of living within the window of tolerance. And this, Dan Siegel came up with this phrase, window of tolerance. And this map, this particular map, was the work of Deb Dana, who's a psychologist who worked closely with Stephen Porges. And Stephen Porges is the scientist who developed the polyvagal theory. That's something else, but it's included in all this. It's sort of one thing led to another in the science of compassion, really. So this here is our, This here is our green zone, the window of tolerance. So this is when I was calling out yes. This is when you feel safe, you feel receptive, you feel comfortable, you feel open. Yes, this is the green zone. And depending on all sorts of things, that green zone could be quite small, where you only feel comfortable in your own space, in your own home maybe, in one room particularly, or it could be quite wide. That window could support other people coming into that space. But all of us, because we're all created with this surveillance system, all of us are going to have a limit to how our safety is. All of us. There isn't a person or a creature in this world that is not designed to feel uncomfortable. That's the way we were created. So too much arousal, too much of that no is going to make us feel tense, shaking, anger, rage. Too much of that will make us feel hyper-arousal zone, the red zone. And if we are staying in the red zone long enough, we will move into immobilization, that sense of freeze. So that's the fight and flight. That's really the, what is it called? The rest and digest. And this is the hyperarousal, which is the immobilization, the freeze. So all of us have these capacities. Now, of course, if you had a fantastic childhood and you had great siblings, and maybe you even had an extended family, you were part of a community and everybody loved everybody else, and you just had this wonderful childhood, You may have very little experiences of knowing what it's like to be here or here. But most people, I think, have limited fantastic experiences in their childhood. And so and also genetically from our parents. I mean, I'm Jewish, and so it's natural for me to have this genetical nervous system, which now they're calling, what are they calling it? Well, there's now a term called racial trauma. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it came out of the research from Holocaust survivors, which is part of my heritage. So this some of it is genetical, but a lot of it is adaptive. And so what the point of this map is to show you that we all have this, and the key is to just go to those edges, to take yourself or notice when you're feeling a little bit uncomfortable. And with some of the practices that there's a little bit that I'm sharing with you, but otherwise go to your own practices, you see how you can take yourself, be in that green zone, and just stretch yourself into those edges. We all feel edgy at times, and the point is being able to notice it. So I felt edgy in my experience with my grandchildren, and that's why I noticed I had to move. That's why movement is a big strategy. I had to get out of that space. And breathing, it's another strategy. But just by using those two things, moving into another room, moving into another chair, going to the bathroom, just moving and breathing, being able to take yourself to a fullness of breath, because that's part of this body arousal, is that when you are breathing from your top, and I'm a natural health therapist, I do body work as well, and it's very easy for me to see with clients that they're so used to holding themselves, their breath is up here. And that is an indicator that there's trauma going on, and there's a sense of that the oxygen isn't going to all their body. It's going to be much harder work for your body to heal itself, which it's naturally created to do, if it's not getting all of the chi through every system. So the key is to just notice where you're in that when you're in that zone, and if you notice it's a bit edgy, to do something. And that sense of moving, of widening that window of tolerance is a key strategy, very key strategy. And most trauma psychologists now are working with this map. Another strategy I wanted to share with you is the Heart Math. I love the Heart Math Institute. It was started by Doc Childra in the 90s, probably in the 80s, late 80s and 90s, and he came out with this wonderful little gadget called an M-Wave, which I used to run assertive communication courses, and this was my second class. I would always introduce this to the people in the room, to the students. Why? Because you know what? It's like the difference between the theory and the practice. Unless you really can see what you're talking about, it's like all theory. No, I'm not upset, I don't feel stressed. With a biofeedback, you can actually see what's going on. And I'll just show you how this works. So at the bottom is my pulse, and at the moment it's red. So red means a bit stressed, a bit vigilant. That is normal, because that's part of our surveillance system, is to be able to notice if there's something going to go on that could be harmful for us. We don't want somebody to run us over. We don't want somebody to yell at us. Well, it's normal for us to be conscious of what's going on in our midst. But I can take myself to blue. You want to watch it? Sometimes it takes a bit longer than other times. Okay, there you are. Can you see it's there? See, because you all laughed, it helped me get there. Now it's going to green. Green is somewhere different. Green is appreciation, because I just appreciated you. I recognise that you helped me. So just by me saying that and feeling it, it took me to green. So red is the normal, it's the anger. Relaxation is, we can all sit under the tree and just calm ourselves down with breathing. But the real point of healing is in our appreciation, which I'll later talk about as part of our system of transcendence. It's another part of what it is to be a human being. So the transcendent emotion is appreciation. So I just wanted to also bring to your attention that, that what you can see on this side of the scale is frequency, and the frequency here is like 120 with anger. There's spikes there, that's our heart rate variability, but the frequency is around 120. Here with relaxation, maybe we're 130, but look what happens with appreciation. Look where our frequency goes there, 700. So what is the frequency? That's a way of measuring, I think it's the chi in the body, measuring what is going on inside of us. And once we are at 150, over 150, we're aware of outside of us. Under 150, our frequency is only connected to what's going on inside of us. Thank you for that. Okay, and so appreciation is taking us not just beyond that, but way beyond that at 700. So Safeness, that's Paul Gilbert, who is the founder of compassion-focused therapy. He's created this map, and he uses the term safeness, which is very different to safety. Safety is when we put a seatbelt on top of us, and also we're worried about not falling over. OH&S rules, there's safety. That's not safeness. Safeness is a feeling inside of us where we're in that green zone. That's safeness. And we can see here that an absence of safeness cues takes us to threat and defend, whereas the cues of safeness take us to open, and it suppresses the threat and defend. This is another Japanese cultural useful thought, which is Kimsuji. I don't know if any of you have heard of this. Yes? Okay, so this is a bowl that's broken in my house, and I glued it and put gold paint on it. Some might think it's more artistic than others, but nevertheless, the whole point is that when something has suffered damage and has a history, it is more beautiful. And, there was a time when us as human beings used to mend things rather than go and buy them. I don't know about you, but I had a mother who knitted, and if we'd grown out of a jumper or whatever, she'd just untangle it all and she'd make something else. Bessel van der Kolk is another great leader on the trauma scene. He's just wonderful. He's born in Holland, but he's in America now. And what he says is mental illness and post-traumatic stress disorder are all about broken connections. And treatment is all about healing connections. So triggers are not always predictable, and glimmers are not always predictable. Socialising can include injustice, especially if you are from a minority. If you are visually obviously a minority, your sense of injustice can happen in a day repeatedly. And now there is a whole thing I was telling you before called racial justice or racial injustice that's come out of the Black Lives Matter. It was always there, but now they're talking about it more. Meditation. There's a whole lot of people now, and there's a whole science now looking at how meditation can trigger people off into disassociation. Meditation can be a self-care exercise, but if it's not done in a way that includes self-care and with a teacher who's aware of the possibility of trauma, then it could lead you to disassociation, a lot of pain. And logic, that's a great one. In the workplace, logic and rational decision making has been the key term since the 80s. All decisions are made out of that. That, if you are not receiving a benefit from that logic, can take you into a great sense of trauma. It can trigger you off because there's an absence of compassion. And that is, so the sense that it's predictable, it's not predictable. Somebody may or may not be triggered. For somebody, logic is fantastic. It makes them feel very safe. And that's probably part of the conflict. Okay, so quickly, because I haven't got time now, isn't that right? 1 minute, okay. So what we're doing, we're shifting gears. So breathing, we did an exercise. I told you, that is a great exercise. Take yourself off to the bathroom and do that. Or do it every day, just to open up both sides of your brain and use both sides. Movement, moving from one place to the other. Time, that's a critical thing as well. Time by itself can actually be something you can use. You can, if you're on the phone and somebody messages you and you find you're being triggered, ring them back later. Take some time. Tracking's what I was doing in that exercise. I was noticing what was going on inside of me. I was tracking myself. And then I was tracking until I felt good. Noticing that. Empathy. Empathy is critical, being able to sense how someone else is feeling. As you can see, I took my granddaughter through that exercise, not directly by telling her, now think about how your sister's feeling, but just asking her to revisit a time in her own life when she had fallen down. And that she herself took her to empathy. Mentalising is critical. Mentalising is critical for play, for imagination. And mentalising is that capacity to, in your mind, imagine. Imagine what it's like for someone else. Imagine a time in your own life when you felt good. That sense of using your mental brain, going back to good memories and creating thoughts and imagining is critical. Compassion. There's so much. I could do a whole thing on compassion. But I said there's a book out there, but compassion is like the key to the whole thing. And sponging, which is mirror neurons, that's Dan Siegel's term, sponging, and that's that concept of visceral, where you're getting the feelings from someone else. What you witnessed in that moving from the red zone to the blue zone and the green zone was my physical body reacting to what you were all doing. And this happens all the time. And it's part of nature. It is not just human beings. Now, anybody who's got dogs, cats, animals, lizards, cockroaches, they all react. Okay, so this is my last slide. So assertive, I always think birds are a symbol of what it is as a human being. You know, birds, you watch them, don't they look like a human being? Walking proudly with their head held high. Doesn't that look like a human being? Dressed up for the day. That is what it is to be assertive, to express ourselves. What's going on inside of us that we want to assert, make strong. But you know what? As human beings, we've been designed to go beyond ourselves. We have been designed, and we are reminded of it. Every time we see a bird fly, we also are like the birds. We can transcend this earth, and we can take ourselves with our emotions to places that are beyond ourselves, to others. Forgiveness, compassion, gratitude are transcendent emotions, and being able to practice them helps us to deal with our triggers of trauma. So thank you very much. Oh no, I can't leave you here. I got 2 minutes, please? Sorry. Okay. So this is what I'm going to flip through this one. This is EFT, Emotional Freedom Technique. I wanted to give you this. I think it's a great gem. do you press it or do I press it? It's a video. Just before you start, this video shows a self-help technique. The video I've edited, okay. Thank you. So that I edited that, so it's not the full thing. But just I wanted to show you that this is like the recent trauma therapy. That's a self-help therapy, but I think you need somebody to start you off with it. That just takes into it takes all the components of the last 50 years of research and everything that includes the Eastern acupuncture points and brings it all together. And it's a wonderful therapy for dealing with trauma. Anyway, thank you very much.